So we've just heard the announcement of the exciting partnership between GMIS and the city of Pittsburgh, as Pittsburgh is emerging as a key centre for AI, machine learning and robotic innovation. So let's hear now from the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, the Honourable Bill Potato, and from one of the great engineering giants based in that city, from Bosch, its Director of Research and Development, Mr. Christopher Martin. Gentlemen, welcome to our discussion. Mr. Mayor, we're hugely excited that we're going to be joining you in your great city next year. What should we expect? Why is Pittsburgh emerging as a great hub for AI and technology?
Well, I think it's a combination of where Pittsburgh was and then where Pittsburgh is today. Pittsburgh was an industrial giant. During the Second World War, we produced more steel than Germany and Japan combined. And that industry led to the creation of innovation around it. Carnegie Mellon University created really to help to build out the engineering capacity of an industrial giant. And what we found is during the 1980s and the 1990s, deindustrialization tore the economic heart out of our region. We went through a depression greater than the Great Depression. But at that same time, the seeds were planted for what we're seeing now as our new economy. They were planted in artificial intelligence, where the field was created, in robotics, where we have become a global leader, in life sciences and so many other areas, including advanced manufacturing. And really today, Pittsburgh is once again on the world stage, but this time not for the production of steel, aluminum, glass, but for the creation of innovation.
And Chris Martin of Bosch, you are part of that new economy that His Honour describes. Tell us what your role is in this. What is it that you and your colleagues do?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. And I absolutely agree with the mayor's perspective of it's not just in general the specific innovations that we're producing, but across this broad field of artificial intelligence, robotics, computer science. So I have the privilege of leading Bosch's R&D center here, and we've been here for a little bit over 2 decades. So we started in 1999, still as the economy here was emerging, and we're here, quite simply because of the foundations that were laid that Mayor Peduto mentioned at Carnegie Mellon many years ago. So I'm wearing my Bosch Center for AI shirt here, and this is really represents one of our flagship efforts around the globe for Bosch's investment in the future of artificial intelligence. So the partnership we announced a couple of years ago with CMU, it was also highlighted very recently by our CTO at his keynote speech at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas at the beginning of the year, about representing one of the pillars of success stories was what we expect in our future development of AI. It's our partnership with Carnegie Mellon. It's the work our team does right here in Pittsburgh. And then through that, we get to bring those benefits to the world.
And this speaks exactly to so many of the big themes behind GMIS, how digitalisation is creating sustainable, inclusive prosperity, and we'll come to a consideration of that in a moment. But just looking at the theme for next year and what Society 5.0 means. Mr. Mayor, what does it mean to you? The notes I have say that it's all about balancing economic advancement with the resolution of social issues. Does that sound right to you?
It sounds exactly right. And it resonates all throughout this country and this world in the days we are living. People looking at ways to be able to improve the environment, people looking for ways to improve society, to be able to eradicate poverty. The city of Pittsburgh was the second city in the United States to adopt the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, meaning that all of the decisions that we make look at how we're lessening the negative impacts as a global member. However, even years before that, we adopted the principles of P4, people, planet, place, performance. in creating indicators on how we are addressing all four of those critical areas when we're spending taxpayer money or creating policy. I think that as we look at this in Society 5.0, what we realize is the very economic model that we have lived with since the early 19th century was based on a single bottom line of profit. And the reality of today is that there are many bottom lines that we need to be able to address.
And this has big implications, Your Honour, for civic policy, for the shape of the city, the feel of the city, the very purpose of the city of Pittsburgh.
It has not only that type of a feel toward it, but in the reality of the long-term plan, it builds a more resilient system. When you start to account for all of these other factors in making decisions of today, you build out a more sustainable system that will be able to survive the shocks and the stresses, many of which we're living through right now with COVID.
And Mr. Martin, where does business plug into this? What's your input into it?
So it's, and I do say this genuinely, it really is my privilege to work for a company with a little bit of an unexpected corporate governance structure. What do I mean by that? So we are not a publicly traded company. If you follow the corporate structure of Bosch all the way up, we're in loosely translated English, we're basically owned by a foundation, if you will. So all this discussion around what it means for say new kind of the stakeholders involved in capitalism, that's quite old hat, I would say, for Bosch. And if you look at some of the commitments that we've made, I'll start a little one on the AI side. A UN program that the mayor is also familiar with, was a speaker in the past, the UN AI for Good initiative. So the head of Bosch's AI efforts globally, Dr. Christoph Pilo, was one of the keynote speakers in advance of us releasing the ethical AI codex about how Bosch develops, deploys, and uses AI in the future. Other things around what you and the mayor mentioned around environmental concerns. What I think is especially prescient that we see going on these days is our Bosch's commitment to being CO2 neutral in the extremely short term. We've seen other companies come out with even potentially smaller footprints than Bosch say, we'll do this in a decade. All right, we're talking about within a year, if not sooner. So I think our unique structure, our unique way of operation allows us to lean into that whether you call it say P4 or Society 5.0 in very specific ways. So not highfalutin talk, but really action that we see on the ground.
And Mr. Mayor, when we look at the industries that are needed to underpin this, we're looking at things like advanced healthcare, logistics, financial technology, infrastructure as well. How do you, as a civic leader, create the circumstances for industries such as those to thrive and develop? What sort of issues do you need to consider?
Well, I think the good case example is the partnership that we created in the field of autonomous vehicles. Early on, Carnegie Mellon was working through their robotics and AI departments to build out autonomous vehicles. In the city of Pittsburgh, they started putting them on the road back in 2008. And although it was limited areas, there was an understanding that they were there. When 2014 rolled around and Uber was trying to decide where they were going to put their autonomous vehicle headquarters, the choices were basically San Francisco, Phoenix, and Pittsburgh. But because Pittsburgh had already had that partnership with Carnegie Mellon and General Motors, the door was already open. So having a government that is willing to be a laboratory of democracy can help the new and emerging industries to utilize public space and to be a partner with government and to create the industries around it. I'll give you just one other example, and that's a direct partnership with Carnegie Mellon as we work to create the world's smartest traffic lights that actually learn. And it was a partnership when I was a council member in my district in utilizing heavily trafficked corridors to create smart corridors. And that partnership was financed through our foundation community that looked at it as an opportunity to build an industry right here in Pittsburgh.
I can't help but notice, Your Honor, that you keep mentioning the word partnership. That seems to be the critical ingredient.
It is the most important part. Pittsburgh would never have come back from the 1980s if it weren't through the philanthropic community investing in places like the Warhol Museum and Children's Museum and putting into a cultural district, so that when we came back stronger. It would never have survived if it weren't for the corporations who were partnering with the city in order to make sure that critical services were not diminished. And it would never have happened if the city, the county, the state, and our federal government didn't work together. The secret sauce of Pittsburgh and what you'll see in 2021 is that we not only talk about partnerships, we create them.
And Chris Martin, from the industry perspective, it's got to be a genuine partnership.
Absolutely, and I think that you've I hope that that you and your audience would see really specific examples of these success stories being driven right out here in the region. So I mentioned this landmark agreement that we have with Carnegie Mellon, for example, but that's just one aspect of things. What I always say is that we're very lucky here, and maybe that does have something to do with our 20 plus year history here, that whenever we pick up the phone and we call, whether it's the city or the county, other incredibly important regional entities, like for example the airport authority, when we pick up the phone and call, like, they answer and people give us a hand, and whether that's something like an introduction or a peer partner or anything like this. Also, stuff I would just say what's very important is also this bottom up innovation ecosystem that does also enable this partnership as well. Let me give you, again, a very specific example. Something we're very proud of is Bosch's audio AI technology now living up on the International Space Station. And that was born out of a partnership that we have, with a spinoff from Carnegie Mellon University called Astrobotic. And they were neighbors from us in a neighborhood within Pittsburgh called the Strip District. Since then they moved on to a larger special built facility in another neighborhood. But that was also something where that connection between, say, the university, the local startup ecosystem, and us as a large corporate allowed all of us to go to places, literally the International Space Station, that we could not have gone alone.
So the three legs of this stool, Chris Martin, are industry, academia, civic leadership.
Absolutely, and I would also really emphasize too and rightly so. Our friends in Silicon Valley get a lot of pub either from just the volume of venture capital that happens there, or the startup ecosystem. But you really get to see again. I'll just really emphasize our friends at Astrobotic. World-class startups. Coming out of this ecosystem, and we talk about sustainability. Some of it is also a newfound type of sustainability where that didn't exist maybe 15 years ago, where a great idea would happen, and then just in order for that startup to survive, they would have to move to a more capital-rich environment like the Bay Area. And we see through examples in the CEO of Duolingo, for example, another great Pittsburgh success story. He's been very vocal about that sustainability effort and saying, hey, listen, no, you can build a successful company here, you can thrive here, you can succeed here. And again, it's not just there's not just a couple of scattered examples anymore. There's many of those. So just within that one that one stool you mentioned of industry, it's large corporates, and you see an increasing amount of investment there. But then also the startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem thriving too.
So that ecosystem, that clustering, and that access to capital are also critical in this.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, I just wonder, there might be civic leaders elsewhere who, when they hear about partnership with business, it might make them slightly nervous. They might interpret that as meaning that industry tells civic leaders what to do. What's your reassurance to them on how partnership remains accountable to the people you represent?
Well, the critical part is that the representative of government is looking out to make sure what is best for the people that they represent. So there, of course, there will be companies that will look at anything that has a regeneration of revenue as the potential to profit from it. The question is the public being rewarded in a way that they couldn't be without that type of a partnership? If you simply answer the phone of prospective partners and just go with what they are proposing, you'll make their shareholders happy, but you won't be doing your job as a representative for the people. One of the ways we started looking at things a little bit different is we started looking at Europe and the examples of direct energy, building out a microgrid within cities throughout Europe. And in the United States, we haven't done that. We have large generators of electricity that send that electricity for miles and miles and waste energy just on transmission, instead of being able to utilize and create a more impactful system. And secondly, in an area like Pittsburgh that has been dependent on fossil fuels, where coal and oil and natural gas have been the industries for over 140 years, we're looking to change that. So we partnered with the University of Pittsburgh in the Swanson School of Engineering to start to build out a plan for microgrid and smaller distribution within the city. And then we partnered with the Department of Energy, who in the first MOU that the Department of Energy signed, we were able under the Obama administration to get an agreement to help us to then bring in companies. So we set the table for the companies then to be a partner with. And now that has gone international, and we have gone into an agreement with the city of Aarhus in Denmark, a city that has basically transitioned completely to a microgrid system. And they are helping to teach us how to make that transition happen. Sometimes government working with academia can set the table for industries to come in. And people who are in government will be a lot more comfortable in making that partnership work.
And another important element when we talk about ensuring that the benefits of this enhanced use of technology in society and industry, how we ensure that those benefits are inclusive, are shared by society as a whole. Mr. Mayor, one of the key issues is education and digital skills, so people are able to be empowered to take part in this.
We learned the hard way. Like many cities, when COVID hit, we had to close our schools. And in doing so, we had to create a system where there was distance learning. First thing you find out is a lot of our children don't have a computer. Second thing you find out is that many of our residents are not connected. There is no connectivity at their homes. And the closest connectivity may be a library. And when realizing that, you realize that you were dealing with the same type of situation that we saw in this country after World War II, when redlining was a process, when banks only gave loans for certain neighborhoods, when certain people weren't able to get loans to buy a house, and where that house and that equity became the pathway to the middle class and others were denied it. When a child doesn't have a computer and access to the internet in their home, they are being redlined out of their opportunity in life. And just as a pencil and paper were critical in all of our growing up, the inability to be able to readily access the internet, especially in a time like this, really creates two different types of society. The ones that will succeed and the ones that won't.
And Chris Martin, this is of vital importance to industry as well. You need people of great talent and ability who have these skills. You also need an informed citizenry, and you need a customer base that is able to make use of the product at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and one of the very, again, a privilege to work for a company, I think that for me is very attractive is, Bosch is a company that maybe many of you, the audience here know. We make things, right? I know it's a little bit old school, but right, one of the reasons why we have 400,000 associates all over the planet is we make stuff, right? We make automotive parts, we make building technology, we make appliances, and as part of our roadmap to the future is also about involving these manufacturing associates who have a quality first mindset, right? They're experts in what they do down to the bit or atom or parts or whatever it is. And so what does it mean for them to have, who are these experts in, say, the analog world? What does it mean to bring them in along this journey into the digital world? And that's something that we're really excited to, leading some efforts right out of our lab here in Pittsburgh, together with our colleagues in Sunnyvale and other efforts around the world, is to engage people and to, as the mayor was saying, is to learn from the lessons of the past. Is not to say cast people aside, but to engage experts who may not be so familiar exactly with the domain you're working in, right? Again, we're talking about digital versus physical, but have a lot to contribute along that journey and in ways that maybe theoreticians or people working, in the digital space alone might not know about. And so very practically, this is where we're going out to our manufacturing plants, both here in the US and around the world, and looking to engage directly with our manufacturing associates, both both in training them, engaging them. So there's an AI curriculum that we've made available to associates all over the planet, a really world-class training where they can take training themselves, but then also bringing them directly into this design and development process of AI. And we think by involving really, again, our 400,000 colleagues all over the planet in this, we're going to get we're going to get a more inclusive, and at the end of the day, we're just going to bring along improvements and results that otherwise we never would have been able to, we never would have been able to do otherwise.
And Mr. Martin, is it also delivering a more sustainable method of production? Does that engagement that you've described with your stakeholders and associates around the world, does the technological advance that we see in some of these technologies, does that enable you to go to your manufacturing processes and your control of them and make them much more sustainable than they might have been in previous generations?
Absolutely, and that's really one of the lead use cases that we've seen for the application of AI. Right, we're not an advertising company, for example. Right, like our AI algorithms do not predict the next thing you want to see or buy on a given platform, but it does. We do see great examples where it's able to perhaps spot defects, better than human perception, or to aid an operator that's looking at things. And give them a hint to say, hey, listen, maybe something over here might be worth giving a second look. So that's also a great example of we're big believers in in automation, not supplanting our human workforce, but really augmenting human capability. We talk a lot about the superhuman ability of AI. And we know that our associates, and it's not just Bosch, but all over the planet, almost no matter what industry you're working in, everybody's overloaded. Everybody's got too much stuff to do. And most people would say, you know what, I could use, a machine looking over my shoulder that would give me a hand so that I can focus on doing the things that I'm best at, and then kind of leave that non-value add stuff behind. And we see countless examples of that, that make our manufacturing more efficient, more sustainable, and it is part and parcel of us meeting that CO2 neutrality goal that we mentioned, right? So this technology is a key part of, we see that as a key part of having very dramatic results in terms of our minimizing our impact on the environment.
And Mr. Mayor, this brings us to a crucial point, that of social acceptability. There may be a lot of people in your city and around the world who look at the use of augmented intelligence, who look at greater automation, and it makes them fear for the future. How do you keep the people with you?
Well, and that's going to happen. And then no matter what it is that you're working with, there is a natural resistance to change. And as we look at this fourth economy, the fourth industrial revolution, what we're looking at is machines making machines. We have gone through the early industrial age that led to the electrification of industry. We have gone to the machine component of industry, and now we're going to the machines making machines. So as we make that transition, we have to bake into it the key principles. And basically, like I had said earlier, in Pittsburgh, we put it around P4. As we're looking at the use of artificial intelligence and robotics, we have to bake into the economic equation how it is going to benefit people. That has to be a part of the transition. It's not just the innovation itself, but how will people benefit? You know, we've lived through this in each of the other stages of the Industrial Revolution. When heavy cranes came to the shipyards, they took away the jobs of thousands of people who would be carrying boxes off of ships. And all of a sudden, a crane was taking things that a human being could never carry. And along the New England coast, entire villages were going to be decimated. And they created the Longshoremen's Fund, a fund that the crane operators had to pay back to those that were losing their jobs. And there were a lot of problems with that. And the money didn't always go where it was supposed to. But it was a way to deal with the negative impact of that change, even if it was a temporary fix. We have to be able to see that as people become displaced by new technology. But we also have to do the same thing with our environment. We have to make sure that everything that we're doing is lessening our carbon footprint in protecting our planet. And then we have to do the same thing with place, because we are all proud of where we call home because of the unique differences that we find within it. And we don't want to take that away with a new industry. And finally, we have to look at the performance, that this actually is an industry that is sustainable for the future. You put it through any type of a filter like that, and you lessen the negative impacts and you increase the positive, and that change becomes less scary.
And Mr. Mayor, conversation is important, a dialogue between civic society, industry, academia, and the population at large. Dare I suggest, even for such as this, the Global Manufacturing and Industrialisation Summit. That's all an important part of the mix of keeping that conversation going.
This is a conversation happening in cities all throughout the world. I am honored to serve as the North American representative to the Global Covenant of Mayors. It's an organization of over 9,000 cities from every continent on Earth. And when we have these discussions about where is the economy going, and a lot of times it is focused around renewable energy and the evolution of how we power our cities, it is always looked at through the lens of equity and the other components that look at building a better society. What has been in the past few years, a wonderful partnership has been the universities that have joined us, and most recently, forward-thinking companies that have also understood that it makes a lot of sense, not only to be a part of it, but making sense money in the future is contingent upon it.
And Chris Martin, business and industry has a crucial role in this conversation as well, being transparent, showing that it's not the robots taking over the world, that this is progress by humans for humans.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the most quoted, tenets from our founder, Robert Bosch, back in the day that you hear, I mean, in a good way, discussed certainly within Bosch from our leadership on down and from the associate level on up is, you know, his quote that he says, I would rather lose money than trust. And I think that this is something that when we talk about, you know, different stakeholder involvement, you mentioned around, you know, your partners, your customers, your associates, leadership, right? You know, that trust in this era of change, you know, is really a critical part of it, right? And we start to see that with some of the maybe a rethinking of, you know, companies that we've trusted either with our data or with our money or who knows, right? And so now we need to we need to think about that trust relationship a little bit, and that's why we're also really committed to this effort around transparency. You see this from for example, from things, or even around things like philanthropy. The Bosch Foundation, I mentioned here in the US, we call it the Bosch Community Fund. What we commit to giving back into our communities, and this is also something that I'm really proud of, that we support STEM education, for example, right here in Pittsburgh, and then a number of different causes, but also nationally. Transparency, engagement together with our associates. You see this, for example, in the way that we negotiate our working conditions with our largest workforce over in Germany. So protecting jobs and having a partnership during this transition time, and then also together with our customers, right? So this ethical codex of AI, so that people, our customers, and then also the end users of the products also know, you know, what is this thing that you're buying from Bosch doing? What is it doing with my data? Where is it living? You know, how can I ensure how can I ensure that my rights are being protected, and of course in line with emerging laws, whether it's GDPR GDPR in Europe, or of course also consumer protection laws emerging here in the U.S. and California and nationally. But we want to also go beyond that, and so, you know, it's our aim through our engagement and things that we're doing, platforms, you know, whether it's our own or other conferences, to be really radically transparent in terms of what we're doing there, because that is ultimately what we see, as you said, you know, the path towards a sustainable business going forward.
And as the Mayor and I discussed just a moment or two ago, Mr. Martin, GMIS, this summit is part of providing that platform for that dialogue.
Yes, we're you know, this GMIS and other really world-class entities, world-class conferences that we see are increasingly choosing Pittsburgh as a destination, and we're really looking forward to being part of that conversation, and hopefully hosting everybody right here in our neighborhoods in just a year, so they can see.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Chris Martin, thank you as well. Gentlemen, both for your time today. I know that our viewers around the world are grateful to both of you for your input. I want to thank all of you for your attention during our discussions and deliberations during the course of the last 2 days. Remember, you can keep in touch with us as we plan that 2021 summit by following us on social media, on Twitter or Instagram. You can find us at GMI Summit. That brings this final discussion to a close, but stay tuned. The final moments of the 2020 summit follow shortly. Don't go away.